welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani. We begin in Bali, Indonesia, where the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is making waves at the G20 Summit following his criticism for Russia's war in Ukraine. Now, the British Prime Minister told the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who's also attending the G20 Summit, that his country should get out of Ukraine. It will be the first time a British Prime Minister has directly confronted a Russian official, a senior one at that, since the invasion began.
Thank you, Barent. Good morning, everyone. This G20 developing countries.
We do apologize, seem to be having problems bringing you that report. We'll bring it to you in a moment. But let's delve into the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We're learning that Russia has attacked the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, damaging residential buildings close to the city center. In what appears to be a nationwide attack, strikes were also reported in Mykolaiv, Chernihiv and Zaporizhia, among other places. And in Kyiv, 3 buildings in the Pechesk district were hit, according to the mayor, Weighty. And meanwhile, the defense ministry says its forces are continuing the offensive in Ukraine's Donetsk region after taking full control of the village of Pavlivka. The ministry spokesperson Igor Konashenkov said his daily reporting that a number of Ukrainian soldiers have been killed and military hardware, including U.S.-supplied weapons, were also destroyed. Pavlivka had already changed hands earlier in the conflict, which Moscow calls its special military operation in Ukraine. Meanwhile, President Vladimir Putin today signed decrees granting honors to citizens in Russian-controlled parts of Ukraine, including Mariupol. The strategic city was the center of the first months of the Russian invasion in the country. Head of the Russian Academy of Sciences had proposed making Mariupol a city of Russian military glory. The proposal was backed by President Putin. In another development, the Kremlin says it will do everything possible to stop the West from seizing its frozen international reserves or plundering them to pay for reparations to Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov was making the statement in criticism of the UN General Assembly and its approval of a resolution declaring that Russia must make reparations to Ukraine for damage inflicted during the 9-month conflict. The West froze around half or more than $300 billion of Russia's international reserves after Moscow sent its armed forces into Ukraine in February. Mr. Peskov accused the West of racketeering and of violating all the foundations and rules of private property and international law. He said the moves in the United Nations were an attempt to use a global forum to formalize robbery. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who is attending the G20 Summit in Indonesia, says the UN had told him of written US and EU promises to remove obstacles to the export of Russian grain and fertilizers. Lavrov said he had received undertakings on this from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres at a meeting on the fringes of the G20 Summit. Russia has long complained of barriers to its farm exports, even though they're not directly targeted by Western sanctions. It said the renewal of the Black Sea Initiative that allowed the resumption of Ukrainian grain exports in July and is due to expire on Saturday depends on resolving the issue to Moscow's satisfaction. He says the promise has covered the entry of Russian ships into European ports and of European vessels to Russian ports, the provision of insurances at normal rates, and removing restrictions on a sanctioned Russian state bank that finances the farm sector. Russian grains and fertilizers are not directly targeted by Western sanctions, but Moscow has complained for months now that they're effectively restricted because the sanctions limit access to ports, finance, and insurance. Over in Ukraine, the Defense Ministry has released footage from a tour in Chernihiv near Kherson. It showed soldiers touring a destroyed air base that was used by Russia. Although not independently verified, it comes after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to Kherson on Monday, following the withdrawal of Russian troops from the city. Russia pulled all its troops out of a pocket on the west bank of the Dnieper River last week, which included Kherson city, the only regional capital it captured since the invasion. And President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine says he welcomes statements by the presidents of the United States and China at the G20 Summit on the inadmissibility of threats to use nuclear weapons. It follows the United Nations General Assembly on Monday calling for Russia to be held accountable for its conduct in Ukraine, voting to approve a resolution recognizing that Russia must be responsible for making reparations to the country. The resolution, supported by 94 of the Assembly's 193 members, said Russia, which invaded its neighbor in February, must bear the legal consequences of all of its internationally wrongful acts, including making reparations for the injury, including by any damage caused by such acts. That resolution recommends that member states, in cooperation with Ukraine, create an international register to record evidence and claims against Russia. General Assembly resolutions are non-binding, but they do carry political weight. Ukraine's foreign ministry has accused Russia of pressuring imprisoned Africans to join the war against Ukraine. A tweet by the ministry's spokesperson, Ole Nikolenko, said President Putin is sending African citizens imprisoned in Russia to the war in Ukraine. A former Zambian student was killed there recently. The tweet said, we call on African Union and all African states to demand that Russia stop ganging their nationals. African students die for Putin's sick imperial ambitions. It comes after the death of a Zambian student in the fight against Ukraine. 23-year-old Lemekani Nyirenda at the Moscow Engineering Physics Institute had been serving 9 years in jail for a drug offense. Nyirenda died in September fighting in Ukraine, but Russia has now only informed the Zambian government. More now on the UN General Assembly held on Monday regarding Russia's attacks in Ukraine. The General Assembly approved a resolution calling on member states to create an international register to document claims of damage, loss or injury by Ukrainians caused by Russia. That resolution was supported by 94 member states, opposed by 14, and 73 countries abstained. The document recognizes that Russia must be held accountable for violations of international law or in or against Ukraine, and must bear the legal consequences of all of its internationally wrongful acts, including making reparations for the injury, including any damage caused by such acts. It also reaffirms Ukraine's sovereignty and calls again on Russia to cease its use of force against Ukraine. Introducing the resolution, the permanent representative from Ukraine, Sergei Kryslitsia, said it was a proclamation that Russia must be held accountable for its violations of international law in Ukraine. The VOA's Anna Chernikova joins us now. Anna, I'm sure you're at an undisclosed location, and that's because of the attacks that happened just a short while ago in Kyiv. Let's begin with that developing story. Attacks in Kyiv, Mykolaiv, Chernihiv, and in Zaporizhia. What are you hearing?
Good evening. Well, actually, I'm standing just next to the bomb shelter as air raid siren is still on, and just 10 minutes ago, I've heard another explosion in Kyiv, and it was reported, actually. So I should say that these attacks are across the whole country. So the main target is energy infrastructure, but also, unfortunately, residential buildings are under attacks, and in Kyiv in particular, at least 2 residential buildings were hit. And for the moment, the rescue operation is ongoing. We just know that one body has been already found under the rubble in Kyiv, but more details will come later, maybe I think even tomorrow. In terms of the attacks, they're happening across the country. The city of Lviv and Lviv region currently have no electricity, almost no electricity completely. 80% of the region is suffering. In Kyiv, half of the city has no electricity for the moment. And here at my place also there is no electricity. So for the moment, the situation is, again, is under control, but it is critical. And it was also confirmed by the representative of the president's office that energy infrastructure is the main target and was again the main target. So situation is quite critical. President Zelensky confirmed that at least 85 missiles have been already fired, and 20 more are expected. So this attack today is even worse than the one that happened on the 10th of October, because on the 10th of October there were only 84 missiles. So today is, let's say, a record in these terms. Again, the situation is that people are in the shelters. People taking this very seriously because explosions are heard around the city and explosions are heard around the country. Yeah, we will be keep the updates.
Wow, Anna, just stay safe where you are. Just a few more questions, though. I know that the government already is, sending out messages for people to, of course, hunker down in bomb shelters and all of that. But were these strikes expected? Because, the G20 Summit is going on in Bali, Indonesia. And we did hear the Ukrainian president, calling on leaders to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He wants them to take more action against Ukraine. So what exactly, do these attacks then signify, considering that even the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, is also attending that meeting in Kyiv, and he's also said, that they'd given Ukraine a few conditions which they're refusing to comply with.
Well, I think that these attacks, which, as you correctly said, are happening just right during the meeting, it's just a proof of what President Zelensky said in his speech to G20 representatives. He said that whatever Russia is saying is not what Russia is doing, and we have to look at the actions of Russian Federation. So this is exactly the actions of Russian Federation, and I don't really, it doesn't really look like, that this country is ready for negotiations if this country continues such massive attacks and the worst attack that was happening since the beginning of the 24th of February in terms of the amount of missiles is happening today exactly at this moment. So I guess that this is exactly what President Zelensky meant, saying that only Russian actions should be considered as their real intentions, and either they're ready or not for negotiations. Really, a lot of explosions and attacks on Kyiv in particular are happening during this kind of, big meetings or big visits by international representatives. Back a couple of months ago, during a very bad shelling happened during the meeting during the visit of Antonio Guterres, for instance, right? So I guess this is exactly what Ukrainian officials are meaning when saying that they do not trust to what Russia is saying. And of course, Ukraine considers, such meetings as G20 meetings and UN meetings as a great platform and a great way to actually discuss possible negotiations. But again, negotiations would only be possible when both sides are ready for that. And I guess when Kyiv and other cities of Ukraine are not, spending half of the day in the bomb shelters.
So apparently Ukraine does have a lot of friends in the G20. The UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak did call for countries to issue a joint statement condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The German Chancellor also got on that. The EU Foreign Policy Chief, the EU Council, the Foreign Council got on that as well as some other countries. But then, even if a joint condemnation is issued, what does that do for, the Russian invasion of Ukraine? How exactly does that impact anything?
Well, first of all, it shows support. So this support, which is, not only a couple of countries, but actually huge amount of countries, and most of the countries, and as we've seen from the vote, from the recent vote in the UN. So of course, this is important in terms of international support of Ukraine, and for Ukraine to understand and to just clarify once again that most of the countries and most of the world is actually supporting Ukraine in this war and will be supporting for as long as it takes. But of course, we all understand that only real actions and real help in terms of humanitarian support, military support, and all these kind of things would actually, could actually create. Could actually create a real change. And the most important, what Ukraine needs for the moment, this is what is said by US officials and by Ukrainian officials, is of course military support and humanitarian support. And now what is also very important is energy sector support, because as we can see, Ukraine is suffering strikes on the energy system, and this is the main target. So again, support of the world is important, but this support is pretty much more important when it is in actions such as real, supplies and real help.
Anna, I'm going to have to let you go. I want you to be safe, and I know you have to run into a bunker now. You do sound like you're on the side of a road. Do stay safe, take care, keep us informed about your safety. Thanks again.
Thank you. Have a good evening.